Hey everyone, Tristan back with another video, and in this video we're doing a first look at the brand new iFi Pro iDSD unit. It's basically a 3-in-1 unit. It's a upsampling iDSD DAC, it's a headphone amplifier, and it's a preamp. Now just to pre-warn you, this is not really a review video per se, in that I don't necessarily talk about the sound signature that much, so please be aware. I will, however, tell you in terms of the sound, it does have that stock iFi sound signature. So if you're familiar with the sound signature of iFi gear, it is going to retain that sound signature, and I do talk about that some in this video. iFi stuff does tend to be quite resolving and also quite impactful in terms of the sound, but maybe when comparing it to something like from Chord or higher end units that are maybe even double the cost of this thing, which is $2,500, it may not sound quite as sweet in the mid-range. Just in my opinion, but that's a very subjective thing, so it's very hard to sort of quantify that in terms of how it sounds. But I did want to sort of preface this video by saying that. I do think that in the $2,500 price range that the Pro iDSD costs, it's going to be kind of hard to beat in that price. And if you are familiar with the iFi sort of house sound, this does retain that sound. But remember, this is not a comprehensive review video, this is more a first look video. So let's take a look at the iFi Pro iDSD. And this is the new iFi Pro iDSD headphone amplifier and DAC sent to me by iFi. And I wanted to show you the case of it, but I think it's important to show the back panel because there's a full assemblage of ins and outs on the back panel. And you can freeze frame this if you want. You can see what all kind of inputs and outputs you can do with this. But something to note is that there's a little selector here, and they have a little screwdriver that they include. That actually enables you to adjust the preamp because it has this preamp outs both single-ended as well as balanced, and you can adjust that to be variable or not variable. So if you want the amplifier, the volume control here to be able to control your speaker level or your audio level, then you're going to want to be sure to set that. You can make it just so that it's locked, and then you'll set your audio level elsewhere. But yeah, so I did want to show that to you because that's something that's important if you want that feature, and that's something that I wanted in my setup. So yeah, you can see all the ports here. It's really got a lot of features. I'm not going to talk about everything because it's almost too much to talk about in one video. If I went through every single feature, this video would be like an hour long or something like that. But rest assured, it has a lot of features like network play, again, full assemblage of ins and outs. So this is basically a 3-in-1 unit. It's a headphone amplifier, it's a DAC, and it's also a preamp. What's pretty unique about the amplifier section, just like the Pro iCan, it's a solid state and tube amplifier, so that's kind of cool. And as you can see, it uses the same chassis as the Pro iCan, but this is a different unit. Let me go ahead and get this plugged in, and we can go ahead and start talking about some of the features. Okay, so now I've got this hooked up and playing a track, and we can go through some of the controls here. The first thing here on the left, the dial, is the input control. So turning that will change it from like USB to coaxial digital, etc. Pressing this can change the brightness of the display. You can make it totally off, and then it kind of cycles through several different brightness levels. This next dial and button here controls whether or not you want this to do DSD remastering. The unit is capable of upsampling to DSD just internally. So if you press this, you can see right now it's on DSD Remaster 512. Press it again, DSD 1024 Remaster. Press again, DSD Remaster is off. Now, this is really a personal preference, what you like in terms of, the sound that you hear. Personally, I kind of like it off, but just normal mode. If I press it, DSD 512 sounds pretty good. When I press it to DSD 1024, I did notice a bit of a softer sound, but it's going to depend on your source material as well. So that's something that's really personal preference, whether you like that or not. But that's certainly one of the selling points of the Pro iDSD, is that it just has built-in DSD upsampling. So if you want to listen to DSD all the time, basically, even if you're just playing a 44.1 CD file, you can do that with this unit. Internally, this uses Burr Brown DACs as well, so that's something to be aware of, which are pretty good DAC chips. I like them better than the ESS Sabre DAC chips. I think the Burr Brown DAC chips is a good choice for the iFi Pro iDSD. Note that it also has an FPGA as well, which is used for the internal processing, like the upsampling and things like that. So that was pressing this switch. Now turning this switch, you have full of different filters. So first you have the Bit Perfect filter, then you've got Bit Perfect Plus, then you've got one called Gibbs Transient Optimized, you've got one called apodizing or apodizing, got one called Transient Aligned, and then you're back to Bit Perfect. So the Bit Perfect and the Bit Perfect Plus filters are the only ones that are basically bit perfect. When you start switching to one of these other filters, then you're no longer bit perfect. So let me read you from the instruction manual what some of these filters do, just so you can kind of get a sense. They're basically just filters to tailor the way that the audio sounds. So bit perfect is no digital filtering is applied, one tap. Bit perfect plus is no digital filtering applied, one tap. Sync roll-off is corrected. SINC roll-off is corrected. Then you got Gibbs Transient Optimized, which there isn't really an entry in the instructional manual for, so I can't really read you something on that. Then you got apodizing, which is modest filtering, no pre-ringing, moderate post-ringing, 128 taps. Then you've got Transient Align, which is max filtering, max pre-ringing, maximum post-ringing, and 16,384 taps. So this is just something to play around with. Your mileage may vary in terms of how it sounds, in terms of which filter to use. But if you want it completely bit perfect, then I suppose you would just put it on bit perfect. But again, this thing really has a lot of DSP processing that it can do, so it really behooves you to kind of play around with that. And then this little switch underneath that, all the way to the left, is the full solid state mode, so you're not using the tubes at all. Then you put it into the middle, you're using the tube circuitry, which is switched to an all-tube Class A section, amplifier section, based on two GE5670 tubes. Then if you switch it all the way to the right, you're in what iFi calls a 2+ mode, and this reduces the available negative feedback to a minimum. As a result, a greater amount of the tube's natural harmonic distortion is produced. Even order harmonics dominate. So again, that's something that you can tailor the sound to and play around with, to your liking. You also have a little switch here for the gain. Right now it's on 0, but then you have a +9 and +18 gain. Through the headphone jack, the output power of this is 1.5 watts at 16 ohms through the single-ended headphone jack right here. It also has a small little balanced headphone jack, a 3.5 millimeter balanced headphone jack. If you use that, it can output, I believe, 4 watts, through the balance mode. So you have right here a single-ended 1/4 inch, and then also single-ended 3.5 over here, and then a balanced and then a balanced, I believe, 2.5 jack over here, actually, not 3.5. And this here is the volume control right here. So that's been pretty much an overview of the different features of the iFi Pro iDSD DAC and headphone amplifier. But I'm just sort of thumbing through the manual here, and I want to just sort of outline some of the features that I haven't already talked about. I've talked about the DSD remastering that's built into it. It also has full galvanic isolation on all the inputs. It also has a WPS button so that it can communicate with your router, so that they can kind of handshake and pair up so that you can actually do network streaming directly to this device wirelessly. And then I've talked about solid state and tube switchability. Also, this display is an OLED display. I've talked about the headphone 3.5 millimeter single-ended socket, as well as the balanced socket, which is a 2.5 millimeter, as well as the 3.5 millimeter single-ended socket, and also the 1/4 inch headphone outputs. It also has Ethernet as well if you want to hook it up wired. It even has a micro SDHC slot as well, so if you have music files on a micro SD card, you can actually play them directly through the Pro iDSD without even hooking up to a network or USB or anything. It also has XLR digital input as well, and also BNC digital input as well. And it also supports a clock sync mode too. So if you have a separate digital audio, clock sync device, it can actually take advantage of that. Now I want to read you a little blurb about the Dac section that iFi includes in the manual. It says that the Pro iDSD uses a quad core of iFi Audio's bit-perfect DSD and DXD DAC by Burr Brown in a custom interleaved configuration. A total of 8 pairs, 4 for each channel, of differential signals are used and mixed. While the Pro iDSD does include an FPGA for digital filter duties, the FPGAs themselves do not perform D-to-A conversion. There are always external DA sections with a limited number of elements. In the Pro iDSD, we use 4 interleaved 64-element converters to give a total of 256-element DAC per channel, manufactured to the highest level of precision. All signals to the DACs are reclocked with the low jitter global master timing derived master clock from the AMR DP777. So this is something that supposedly also eliminates jitter as well, just internally as well. iFi says that data for all of the inputs is sent to a large dynamic memory buffer where it's de-jittered internally to eliminate any transmission of source jitter to the DAC output. The memory buffer data is then reclocked by the low jitter global master timing clock, which also drives the X-Core 200 and FPGA engine. And that's something that's built in internally in the Pro iDSD. So the iFi Pro iDSD is really pretty unique in that it's one of the few DAC headphone amps on the market that is both solid state as well as tube and allows you to switch between the two. It also has a full assemblage of ways that you can tailor the sound, as mentioned already in this video. So this has been my look at the iFi Pro iDSD headphone amplifier, preamp, and DAC. It retails for $24.99. And it sounds really good for that price, especially if you're already familiar with the sort of stock iFi sound signature, which this does seem to maintain. And iFi has said that they've really tried to jam-pack this thing full of features. It can even do onboard MQA as well. I don't believe it does the actual decoding, but it does do the rendering. And of course, the full upsampling of like CD quality files to DSD internally, and the fact that it's both solid state as well as tube switchable. And it has plenty of power to drive virtually any headphones. It just has a full assemblage of features that they've really tried to jam pack in here. So thanks for watching this video, and for community discussion, see the comments section. And for pricing and availability, see the description field.